Okay, okay. We tried to go live earlier. My brother, author Justin Wilson. We're going to talk about his book. This is a live mental health conversation, and I'm still grateful to be back. We tried earlier from the other page, but now we're on the personal page. We want to go ahead and get some conversation started since we can go ahead and have them on the live. So chime in, you guys, chime in. I want to have a great little quick conversation about, of course, his book, but also different aspects of mental health like vulnerability. So we want to tap into that really quick. We know it's late and we already done missed about 30, 40 minutes, so we're going to still get some good dialogue in because that's the main goal, of course, to get some good conversation in, some great discussions in. And we're going to talk about, first of all, vulnerability. We're also going to talk about societal expectations of men of men because we are men, but it's also information that can be useful for the queens as well. But like I said, one of the things that we're going to be discussing is vulnerability. We're going to be talking about societal expectations, love, you know what I'm saying, but all about mental health and healing. And his book, which is called Courageous Vulnerability, man, it's such a great book. And as I told you guys on the other platform, as you read this book, you're going to feel every word that you read. Well, I did. When I read the book, I had to take periodic breaks because the experiences in this book hit home so hard that I had to go digest it. So, you guys, man, if you ever encountered some of the things in life that we've encountered or that he's encountered, you would definitely resonate with the book and you would definitely think it's a good read because it's vivid. As you read the book, the pictures painted very vividly, and you literally can feel his pain. You can feel it in the pen. So I definitely want to talk about this book. Let's go ahead and bring him on right now so we can get this conversation started. Let's go ahead and tap in. Greetings to everybody that's on the call already. Um, Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tapping in. Yo, yo,
Hey, what's
can you hear me?
going on, bro?
Yeah, everything is going well. I can hear you good. Um, for the first time, man, my headphones is working pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep them in. I ain't even gonna take them out. I'm gonna keep them in.
Okay.
But man, how you feeling today? We're gonna break the ice. How you feeling today?
Um, it's been a good day. Started off kind of special, challenging, character building, as some may call it. But it overall it's been a good day. I'm happy about today.
Okay, good, 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 good. Well, since a big part of your book is spiritual, right? It's a lot of spiritual development because like after you write, you always go into bringing the Lord into the healing process. So before we even go into the conversation, I would love for you to say a quick prayer for us.
Okay. Precious Lord, we thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. We honor you. We praise you. We submit to you, and we look to you for all things. We pray that this conversation be beneficial and prosperous to anybody listening. And we pray that irrespective of what we discussed tonight, um, you be glorified for your hand in all things. These and many other blessings we ask in Jesus' most holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I appreciate the prayer because we're all here because of him. So we don't want to lose, that focus. We don't want to lose that. We want to keep that at the forefront. But with that being said, man, I also want to give you congratulations for your second published book.
Thank
Um, I don't think because we do so much work, I kind of oftentimes think that we kind of forget how big it is. Because I know I do. One of the things that I don't really see some of the work that I do, but other people be like, man, you do so much, you do this and that. But oftentimes we forget, that you're doing great. You're doing great things. So especially you're not just writing books just to write books. Your books have meaning. There's a lot of meaningful things that you're talking about. We're going to talk about some of those meaningful things tonight. So, first off, Courageous Vulnerability. Man, as I read the book, I literally had to take periodic breaks. Now I'm a vivid, I'm an avid reader, so like I could read a book in one setting, but it depends on what the book is. Now it just so happened that the stories and the poems that you wrote in the book was so vivid that I had to take breaks because I felt them so deeply. And it didn't just happen to one or two poems or one or two stories. It dang near happened to every last one of them. So I had to take a step back, and really digest it because you talked about so many things. It almost was if I was reading a movie, but my movie. Like,
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Because it's a lot of story, as far as like Prey. Prey was one notable thing, and I really commend you for writing part two to Prey, which is the forgiveness, the self forgiveness portion. Because when we go through things, oftentimes we don't really feel like we have to forgive ourselves. It's all about the other counterpart or the other person that wronged us or whatever the situation may have been. We don't really think about it in terms of self forgiveness. But when you forgave yourself, right? I want to talk about that first before we get deeper into it because I feel like um that's also a part of vulnerability. I think that's also a part of vulnerability. Um to to forgive. Because sometimes we look at forgiveness as a weakness, of course, because it's like, I don't want to come to you. You did this to me, right? I don't want to come to you. You did this to me. Why should I have to apologize for something you did to me, right? So that's always the position that we put ourselves in when we go through things and when somebody has done something to us. So talk about that part too, like forgiveness. How did you start to forgive yourself? What did that process look like? Because we want people to get something from this, and I know that it's easily said than done. So let's kind of talk about some of those things that you had to do to get to the place to see like, hey, I need to forgive myself for me.
um, I think um the step one to self forgiveness was acknowledging that I had wronged myself by not acknowledging what happened to me. Um, Step two was accepting, hey, it did happen. Um, it's not your fault that it happened, but it did. And acknowledging that it did, um, acknowledging that it did was not me being like I had to come to like it's not you being a coward, it's actually you being um it's a form of self-care. Like in the past couple of years, 3 years, we started hearing terms, or I started hearing terms like self-care, self-love. Um, what necessarily that wasn't necessarily terms that I heard very often.
Hmm.
But I started hearing those terms and then, got into therapy, and a big part of my process has been getting to know me.
Hmm.
And so in the process of getting to know me, um, you start doing, I started doing a lot of self-reflection. And I can't think of the influencer's name, but there's an influencer on TikTok not TikTok, but Instagram that I follow. And he said, uh, I can't even remember exactly what he said, but I know what he said made me realize, wow, like I need to, this is something I need to address. And As a matter of fact, no. Jordan Peterson said, uh, you should treat yourself like you're somebody you care about. And
Mm,
I was like, wow, like that's it's a simple statement, but it's a really, really that has a lot of weight to it.
yeah.
It had a lot of weight to it for me. And I was like, man, you know what? I do matter. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that you do matter. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that you deserve um you deserve. Like that was something that I really struggled with as far as like feeling like I deserved anything because it felt like entitlement.
Mm,
But I had to come to the conclusion that there are some things that you, as a result of existing, are entitled to and that you do deserve. Um, especially if you are giving these things. So if you are a caring person, you deserve to be cared about. If you are a loving person, you deserve to be loved. If you're patient, you deserve patience. And it's what I came to the conclusion of is while I deserved it, no one is obligated to give it to me, but I am obligating myself to require it. So
mm,
when somebody chooses not to give it to me, that's absolutely fine. But if I feel that I'm not in a place where uh I'm getting love and patience, care, and understanding and respect, then I'll vacate that place. Um, and as far as it relates to the poem, I had to get to the place where I said to myself, you didn't deserve for that to happen to you, but you do deserve to be free of it. And I decided to just, hey, let it go. And you know, writing has been a hiding place for me. Anybody that writes or journals, there are things. If you're transparent in your journals with yourself, there are things in that journal that you would probably hurt somebody before you let read them. And
yeah.
I took some of those parts that you don't share with people, and I shared it. In the hopes that it would help because I'm not. For me, I don't. I didn't want to be a. I didn't want to continue hiding behind those things. Things happen. They are what they are. But I don't want to give those things any more power. And what I realized in therapy is the more transparent, the more vulnerable you are, the better job can be done for you um, in therapy. So yeah, I'm just not. That was the process for me to understanding what um self-forgiveness and apologizing to self was. I wanted to be free from those things that were tormenting me. It was torment. Um, at times it was difficult to sleep. It was difficult to think. Um, it clouded judgment. So a lot of things that a lot of decisions that I made that reflected a lack of self-care, um, a lack of self-value, uh, were tied to me not having self-care and not valuing myself. And I don't want to live like that no more. And I don't think anybody should live like that. I think God thought enough of you from the point of you being a sail to make sure you were the strongest and you were the fastest. And you're here. You beat the odds being born.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I I'm not gonna view myself as less than for anybody's comfort. because I've already beat the odds by the grace of God. Um, and so yeah, that's the way I view it. That's I didn't want to be I didn't want to continue to victimize myself because I have an issue with victim mentality. I don't care for a victim mentality, and I for the longest I view my approach to it as me subscribing to victimhood ideology and acknowledging that you've been victimized and subscribing to victimhood
Mhm.
ideology for me is not the same thing.
See, let's go deeper into that because now, first of all, I'm going to respond to all that you said in your process of forgiving yourself. Now, my response to your self-forgiveness is that what I like to tell people when it comes to your mental health healing journey is that it doesn't happen overnight. Because
No,
you said a whole lot right then. Like that was a whole process that you had to go through before you got to that place. So what I realized in my self forgiveness is that one of the first steps is accepting whatever it is that happened and accept yourself after the fact. Because sometimes there's kind of no way you can move forward without self acceptance. You have to accept the fact that I am who I am, and you have to become confident in that person, even if you have to make some changes. So that's my response to that. But my next response is when you was just going into victim mindset. Now now let's go deeper into vulnerability. So to you, right, as a man, what is vulnerability to you? What does that look like? Let's talk about some examples because one of the main things I want to get out of this call, one of the main things I want the audience to get out of this call is that vulnerability is not so much a bad thing because there's a lot of stigma connected to vulnerability. And coming from a man's standpoint, bro, I think that's where it came from. Us being men, we I don't feel like we can be victims, to be honest with you. What is a victim as a man? Like, there is no like, what is that? so so expound on the fact that being a man, that's what's a challenge of vulnerability. Simply, the mindset of us being a man and the way that we're raised and the way society says that we should be. There's a lot of things, you know what I'm saying, that we have to, we got to strong arm everything, and it doesn't leave room sometimes for us to even breathe or take a break. And honestly, I've been to the place where I can't take naps. You don't feel like you can do anything. You don't feel like you can take no time off. You don't feel like you could take a break, and I think that's all about us being who we are. We supposed to be everything for our families. We're supposed to be everything for other people. But like you said, it's kind of hard, to give that same energy to yourself when you don't see yourself in a positive way, which is why you have to forgive yourself. So moving forward into that, I want you to talk about that victim mentality and what does vulnerability look like on a man. Like, how do a man be vulnerable? What does that look like? Give some examples.
I guess for me, understanding that being a man did not mean I was not human or that I was superhuman. I was still a human being. I am still a human being as a man. Um, being a victim is someone who has been victimized. You have been wronged. And as a man, you can be wrong. You can be. It's not a defeat, and I think we associate victim being a victim with defeat. It's not a defeat. You were wrong. Um, and I know in society you got to be tough, and the toughest guy wins, and all of this kind of stuff. Um, but I don't I stopped viewing it as I was defeated. I was wrong, period. Um, and I accepted that I was wrong. And anybody that is a victim of something and it's holding them hostage, just accept that you were a victim. Don't contend and don't and for me, it was a matter of not continuing my victimization by staying there. I'm not going to stay in this place within myself that hurts me. Now, mind you, um, it was probably 22 years of me being in that place before I was able to come out of it. And I learned how to cope with it. I learned how to function in it very well. Unless I said something, most people that knew me or that know me wouldn't have even known that it was something that I had dealt with. But I knew, like yourself, um, I couldn't sleep with it because I had a point to prove. I'm not this person that went through this. And the fact of the matter is, I was still all of the other stuff I was, but that was a part of it.
Right.
Um, and so it's important to, I guess, as a man, as for me, it's important to not define my manhood by everybody else's manhood. Um,
Mm.
I'm not there are similarities in people, but nobody's identical. Down to identical twins have differences. Um, and so I I define based on like I define my manhood fundamentally based on what the Bible says it is. But when it comes to the cultural impact of manhood, I don't necessarily describe to that idea because a lot of what I've learned is a lot of what I think when I step back and look at a man and say I want to be like him. There's a whole lot when I make a statement like that. There's a whole lot that I don't know about that man that I'm saying I want to do, and I may not want to do that. I may not want to be that way, and so for me, it's a evolving thing as I see aspects of life that I feel would be beneficial to me and would allow me to be beneficial to others. I subscribe to those ideas. I tweak them as I go. I think about those things, consciously and unconsciously, and and um, and then I move forward. But I'm not trying to be anybody else. I'm not going to victimize myself by trying to reach standards that I'm not fully aware of and can't be fully aware of. I go back to another statement Jordan Peterson made when he talked about how we'll look at um someone and say, "Man, I want to be like that person," but we don't see that that person is walking down the street with a smile on their face and looking for the nearest bridge to jump off of because their soul is tormented. Um, and social pressure, I think, has a lot to do with your soul being tormented because you're trying to be better than somebody who, in your mind, is in a much better and a much different place than you. But the reality is, you don't know that. They could, in reality, be that way, but in reality, they could hear your situation and wish they could be anything like you, and you would be like, you want to be like me? But yeah, like I'm learning because I'm still in the process. Like you said, this is a long, getting your mental health together is like deconstructing a lifetime. Like I know how to hide within myself. I know how to not be vulnerable. I know how to act like nothing is wrong because I've done it for so long. It's natural to me. it's just not beneficial to me.
Right. I
And
want to
so,
respond. I want to
yeah.
respond to that. I don't mean to cut your wisdom, but um, I do want to say that victimization. Do you consider victimization vulnerability?
um, when you say, do I consider victimization vulnerability? Do you mean
Is being a
being
victim? Does being a victim makes you vulnerable?
being a victim makes you open to be makes you vulnerable to exploitation. So somebody can exploit you. Um, and so I don't believe in just being selective vulnerability, courageous
Mm,
vulnerability, because you don't want to give. Here's an unfortunate reality, but there are people who are looking for a way to hurt you. Um, hurt people. Those people have been hurt, and their defense mechanism is to hurt others because it makes them feel tough. Um, so being a victim exposes vulnerabilities. You can be in a relationship, and I can't speak for all men, but if if there are men like me, when I'm in a relationship with somebody, I'm open to that person. That is my weakness. I know it, and I make sure they know it. And now I've understood that I make sure that the person I'm dealing with knows you are my weakness. I need you to be responsible for that. Um, I can't get mad at you the same way I get mad at everybody else. I can't cut you off the way I cut everybody else. I can't. There are things that because I care about you the way I do, I'm going to be responsible for how you feel. I'm not going to do you any kind of way. So you're vulnerable. If you become a victim, it's because that person has victimized you, or if you make somebody a victim, you victimize that person, because you're vulnerable to them, um, and and that's where you want to be careful at. Like I obviously, everything I put in that book, I stand behind it. I'll say it. I acknowledge it. Um, I'm not saying we should be blind. I guess that's a good word. Blind. I'm not saying we should be blind to the threat of danger because it is dangerous. We live in a dangerous um culture. I won't necessarily, the world is dangerous, I believe that, but I think as a culture, the cultural perspective that a lot of us live in, um, is a dangerous one because there's just a lot of people that have been hurt, and they don't necessarily view um we view things from that lens, and I don't think that's a wise thing. I think that's I guess it's wise in as much as it is a defense. Um, but for me, that's just not a healthy way to live. Like if you're
do you
going to love somebody, you want to love them. Like I want to love you. I want to be open to you. I want you. Like if you spend enough time with somebody, they're going to know something about you that 99% of the world does not know. Um, and that's a vulnerability.
you're kind of affirming you're affirming a lot right now because I feel like um vulnerability is a part of life. I was thinking about that earlier. I really feel like it's human nature. I don't
It
feel like it's
is.
something you can avoid. And like especially when you face pain, right? There's no way. Like when you're in pain, that's like one of the hardest positions to be strong in. Now, coming out of the pain is kind of when the strength comes, right? Like after the fact, you can look back on the pain that you endured, and it'll increase your strength then. But while you're in the pain, right, while you're going through the hurt, while you're going through all the things that you're going through, I feel that that's human nature that God put in us, right, for us to be in a vulnerable state. Now, if you're at a point where you're never vulnerable, I don't know, man, because I'm thinking like I feel like anger and aggression is also vulnerable because I feel like a lot of things fall under vulnerability that
Absolutely.
we don't really we don't really categorize that as vulnerability. You see what I'm saying? Because like even when you're aggressive, even when you're angry, it shows lack of emotional intelligence. And lack of emotional intelligence is vulnerability in a
Hmm.
way. But I don't necessarily think that it's a negative thing. Like I said, I really think that we should take vulnerability as a learning tool, for self. Because like you said, like you was talking about when you've been in a relationship, you're okay with showing your vulnerabilities, to someone that loves you. And I think that's good. But also I feel like um we should have a good relationship with vulnerability because we can learn. Like it's literally a way for us to learn ourselves and for us to um be a complete person.
Right.
And like you were saying, like you were saying earlier, you said something of some sort about you can cut somebody off, but you can't cut the person that you love off that easily. I take that as, we create egos, right? We create egos, and we use egos to protect ourselves. And so, as we moving through society, and we talked about society norms and society expectations, as we move through society, we create these walls that we put up. We create these defense mechanisms, like we talked about earlier. And I think that's what that's what it all that's what it's all about. It's all inclusive, to us just being. I think
Right.
vulnerability is a part of us being, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a learning thing, so I thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So I asked you a question of to give like some examples of vulnerability because me personally, I have problems pointing that out, because like I said, there's so many versions of emotions that you go through that could be considered vulnerable. So like what really falls under the category of vulnerability? Like I don't think that it has just one, I don't think it's one definition of vulnerability because in some in some contexts, vulnerability could be said to be weak, but I really think that it's also a strength.
Right.
In what ways do you feel like vulnerability could be a strength?
Um, when I think for me, like one of the number one ways of being vulnerable is in the context of being human being, um, is loving and allowing yourself to love. Um, allowing yourself to love yourself. All of those for me are approaches to vulnerability. Like to
Mm,
think, okay, I'm going to just be me. I'm not going to put on this show and only show my best. I'm going to be intentional about just being me. I want this person to know me. Um, and, and for me, that's a strength to have the courage to open yourself up to possibly being hurt, which to me that's when you grow to the point of being able to be in love with somebody, I think that emotion or feeling develops because this person not just made you happy, but they handled you when you weren't. They handled you properly when you weren't happy. Um, I think that is the love that um mothers and children share is because as a baby you are 100% dependent and vulnerable, and you grow up with your mother and she defends those vulnerabilities and develop defenses within you so that you can defend those vulnerabilities within yourself. Um, in an emotional way. And then, you know, for those of us who experience um our fathers or a man in our lives, we learn other forms of defense. Um, we learn other forms of defense and we grow into that. But when you allow yourself to love someone and be loved by someone, you have to go back to that state of being vulnerable. You can't you're not the tough guy all of the time. And
Right.
that's a defense mechanism.
Exactly.
You said something about anger. Like anger is your body's defense mechanism to put you in a place to defend yourself. You feel like you have to defend yourself, and so you get angry, and your
Mm.
senses are heightened. And
Whoa.
if you're a fighter, you're ready to defend yourself with everything in you. Um, but being vulnerable, um, I guess for example, without giving um too much of the poem away, pray, right? For me, um saying saying it and making it available for somebody to read it puts me in a position for somebody to be like, oh man, he let that happen to him. But there's somebody out there who's experienced a similar experience who's going to say, wow, somebody else, it happened to somebody else. And I kind of know this person. So like I can get through this because they got through this and I would have never known it. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Um, and I think that's turning that vulnerability into a strength. And it's
That's powerful.
being courageous enough to allow your vulnerabilities to help somebody else because ultimately I think that's what life experiences are for, to pass the wisdom along, to pass that experience along to say, you know, I hope hopefully I wish I could say I would be dishonest to say hopefully it never happens to anybody else and I was the last person that happens to because I know other people that it has. Um,
Yeah.
so what I will say is I hope somebody wouldn't wait 27 years to address it like I did. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Right.
and it may have been more, it may have been, it's probably more along the lines of 33 years of just sitting in the trauma. I would hope that somebody with much younger who's experienced it, who it has um affected them will say, you know what, like I wanna understand why I feel the way I feel. Um when I see certain traits of being a man in a young male, um hypersexualization, um strong drive to put on display that they are the tough guy. Um, because I know that those are some of the things that I did to mask it. I'm like, I wonder, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's
Yeah.
not something you could just walk up and have a conversation with somebody or with, because I wouldn't have ever admitted to anything like that if you just walked up to me and said that. Um, but those are things to me. Those I know that those were things that I did. Um, that 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 were not beneficial to my life. And had I got help earlier, I perhaps would have I perhaps would have started the journey of self-care a lot earlier than I did. And I'd be a lot further along and hopefully a lot more advanced. Um so the being for me exposing that part of yourself that is not serving you well um to the right people or person for the purpose of being helped, that's a strength. And you have to be vulnerable to do that properly and to get the help properly. And for me, that vulnerability uh, it's a strength to start it. It's a strength to learn and develop into a better person, and it's ultimately a strength to give that better version of you to whoever you give it to, your children, your friends, your family, your mate, whoever that is, whoever it ends up being. Um, you become better for you first, and they reap the benefits of it. And so it goes from being vulnerable to not letting that thing that has tormented you continue to torment you. Now you understand it. Now you know how to operate in and around it. And you know how to, you can see yourself. So you can see how what that thing did to you is affecting more than just you. And you can consciously see yourself going into a place where that thing that is tormenting, that is causing you trauma, we're getting
Hmm.
ready to pass that trauma on to the next generation. You can
Yeah,
stop that generational curse by understanding I don't want to train, I don't want to give that generational curse to my offspring. And it started because you were vulnerable enough to say, I have had something happen to me that I don't want to control me anymore. So I think I would say that that would be a way that it would be a strength when you can take that thing that has happened to you and make it into something that happened for you.
that's powerful. I needed that. I needed that. These are the questions that I'm asking you are literally questions that I really have. So these are really authentic questions that's from me. Um, Also, you made me realize something that there's a difference between vulnerability and insecurity. Because you talked about a lot of healthy ways to take vulnerability. You just explained a lot of healthy things that you could do with your vulnerability, which is why it became a strength. But I feel that when you misuse your vulnerability, it turns into an insecurity. And
Hmm.
when your insecurities, man, can lead you to so many other places, from depression, you know what I'm saying, to especially anxiety, because anxiety is a big thing when you have a lack of confidence. Self-confidence and self-esteem is really attacked by anxiety a lot of the times. For me personally, because if you have strong confidence, it's kind of hard to be nervous. You know, you don't really have a reason to be nervous. Lack of confidence breeds you know nervousness. But with that being said, man, I really appreciate you for coming on. And one of the main things that I wanted this call to learn was that vulnerability is not all bad. So with the last question that you answered, that really that really pretty much accomplished my goal, because I wanted the whole audience to realize that vulnerability is not such a bad thing that society creates. It creates. If we go by what society wants us to be, we'll be a monster. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
absolutely.
saying? We will be a whole monster. So to maintain a greater version of ourselves, we have to unplug from society to norms and from societal expectations and really plug in, like you said, with the higher power. Because if you go by that, right? If you go by being a man of God, it's so much easier than being a man of the world, because there's a lot of release that you have. There's a lot of release that you can have being a man of God versus being a man of the world. There's not many outlets in the world, but you have an outlet at least as a man of God. Like, we have communication with God. We have communication with people that have been influenced by God versus the blind leading the blind. You see what I'm
All right.
saying? So I thank you for sharing this. And as your book, the name of the book is Courageous Vulnerability. This was very courageous for you. Like, as you read the book, I'm like, God, like, story after story, story after story, story after story. I'm like, he's sharing this. He's wearing his emotions on his sleeve right now. And that's vulnerability as a strength. I didn't even realize I was asking you these type of questions that align with the book, and I think it's because I actually put energy into it. Like I actually thought about vulnerability, but this came around full circle because this whole book shows your vulnerability, but it shows it as a strength though. It doesn't show it as an insecurity. Like
Right.
you're creating this masterpiece, you're putting this out to the world. It shows that you turned your vulnerability into a strength. Now you went from being insecure, right? You went
Absolutely.
from you went from being insecure to being to being more secure in yourself, which allowed you to accept that vulnerability and to put that vulnerability out. So man, this whole process has been beautiful, man, and watching you transition in your writing, from the pews, man, that was a great book as well, man. I can't even. You're just a great all around writer because I see that you're comfortable with writing. I believe that you made yourself comfortable with that instead of just talking, you know.
That was writing was actually a getaway. I could write what I wanted to and say what I wanted to without confrontation. Um, and so even writing at one point was a way to hide. And from the pews was thoughts that I had that went against cultural norms, a very specific culture, the norms. And I'm just like, you know what? Like God gave me a mind. And I stand like I live what I think anyway, so I may as well stand on what I live. And
Yeah,
so yeah, like if you're gonna live it, you might as well stand on it. You know what I'm saying? Like if you think a certain way, then stand on it. And always be open to have your mind change. Like I'm always open to have my mind change. I don't know everything. I don't have the world figured out. I know a lot less than I do know because I don't
mm,
have access to infinite information. Well, I may have, yeah, I don't think that I have access to infinite information, and I do have information capacity. I don't know everything, but um
correct.
even writing started out as a way to hide and courage like some of the stuff that is in from the pews I wrote when I was 14 years old. I was really young when I wrote that stuff,
For
and I shared
real?
some of it. Yeah, some of that stuff is like, for example, pray is probably 3 or 4 years old at this point, but it was in me from the time that it happened. So
God.
it manifested 3 years ago, but I'll be 40 this year. It's at least 31 years old. You see what I'm saying? I had it
Yeah.
in me for 31 years, but it it uh it manifested to the place where I was gonna share it with her. Like I remember writing Pray. I was driving to New York. I was working driving to New York, and Pray, the way my writing process is, when I start to feel something and it's something I gotta write, it just starts to flow out of me. So whatever I'm doing, I have to stop. And I remember getting that rush of words and pulling over on the side of the interstate and writing that piece out. I wrote that piece completely in one setting. Of course, I had to go back and critique it and everything like that, clean it up, but it flowed out in a matter of about 15 minutes. I wrote everything. All of my thoughts were clear, and I could put them into the I could write them down, and then I went back and read it, and because it was something that I had hid for so long, I cried like a baby reading it. Like, oh my God,
Man.
I can't believe this. And then it was so difficult to decide to share it with others, I wasn't gonna do it. And I kind of just said, I don't care. I'm like, I told myself, even though I did care, everything in me said, don't share it. And I said, I'm going to listen to the small voice this time. I'm not going to listen to the big voice. And I'm going to share it. And that's pretty much how that happened. So, it, like you just got to do it, man. You just got to do it. Like if it's in you, do it. Live. I hear people say things like live your truth. And I definitely got to admit, I am not a your truther because I think, I think truth is objective. I don't think it's a subjective thing. I think it's objective. So, but I will say that in that moment, I was like, I'm going to live my truth. This is my truth. Now it is for me, it is the truth, but yeah, this is what I'm sorry. This is what it is. Like, um, this is what it is. And so yeah, you just you be honest with yourself and live that honesty. Be open to have your honesty challenged and willing to change if necessary. Be open to yourself. Be true, be true to you. I think you might pause.